Today we're going to be talking about the three metamorphoses of Friedrich Nietzsche in his book, Thus Spake Zarathustra. So, Thus Spake Zarathustra is a fictional work by Nietzsche written from the perspective of, or about the prophet Zoroaster, who, or in this text, Zarathustra. That's another way of pronouncing his name. And the text is a critique of the kinds of spiritual and religious traditions represented by Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Zoroastrianism, and so on. Zoroastrianism was the first of the prophetic religions we have. It predates Judaism by a little bit and is from Persia or Iran. And it's a very small religion these days, a few 100,000 followers maybe, but it used to be one of the biggest religions in the world until most people in Iran converted to Islam. So Nietzsche's picking Zoroaster because he's the first prophet. And Zarathustra, in the text, remember this is a completely fictional account. The story is he's gone up to a mountain to meditate, and while he's meditating at the mountain, he comes to realize a new reality and rejects his faith in God. So what Zarathustra does is he comes down from the mountaintop from where he was meditating, and he decides to preach his message to the common man. The message is a rejection of God and the overman, which, if you remember, is, it is this idea that a person can will their own values into existence. Most people, Nietzsche thinks, accept values from other people, right? Like you adopt your parents' values, you adopt your society's values, you adopt values from friends and colleagues and television. But the overman, Nietzsche says, creates their own values. What that looks like is another matter. But, a lot of very pretentious people call themselves overmen after reading a little bit too much Nietzsche, but it's unclear exactly what the overman would look like, but it's some kind of alternative, something similar to a prophet. A prophet, of course, brings people new values from God, whereas the overman brings you new values from themselves. Okay, so after going to speak to the crowd, and after the tightrope walker walks across and dies, the tightrope walker is walking between beast and overman, as Zarathustra says, and then plummets to his death. And so after this happens, the people leave, and Zarathustra has to leave the town himself because the people are angry at what he was saying about the overman. And so Zarathustra then goes on and gives a few other speeches, and one of these speeches is on the three metamorphoses of the spirit. And this represents the process that the spirit goes through to realize what it truly is. Okay, so the first metamorphosis is the camel. Now, the camel represents then the first metamorphosis from the beast. The beast is just the wild, uncontrollable spirit. Unlike the beast, the camel is obedient, and it accepts its duties from authority higher than it. If you could think of the camel train in the desert, a single man will be leading 100 camels across the desert. They're all obedient to him. They follow his commands. So it's not a feral beast. It is very much a domesticated, obedient, rule-following creature. And this represents the religious self for Nietzsche. And think of very conservative people who follow the rules. Now, what's significant here, if you remember, that Nietzsche is very critical of religion. He thinks that religion is not necessarily a good thing. But here it's important. He's saying that whatever problems religion may have, it's an important part in turning us into a fully developed spirit. If you remember from the video, Nietzsche himself grew up religious and wanted to become a priest, and then rejects religion. Like the camel, as we're going to see, is going to reject religion. Now it has to accept it and live according to its rules. The next metamorphosis is the lion. The lion represents something very different than the camel. And the lion confronts the dragon. The dragon is the beast that commanded the camel, and it now continues to try to command the lion. And it's what the second metamorphosis has to overcome. There's like a mortal combat in the desert between a lion and a dragon. It's a very epic text if you think about it that way. So what does the lion represent? It represents a struggle to overcome the moral laws of religion, and the dragon represents those moral codes of religion. Hence the fact that, as Zarathustra says, its scales represent the 1,000 thou shallts in religion. If you think of the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt honor no gods before me, etc., etc. The lion rejects these rules, and it says no, and it rejects all moral law. So the lion is nihilistic. What's nihilism? Nihilism is a rejection of something because you think it has no meaning. So, for instance, if you're a moral nihilist, you reject morality because you think morality has no meaning. It doesn't really exist. It has no substance to it. So the lion rejects religion. And in this sense, the lion for Nietzsche represents the nihilism of his age, rejecting Christianity. But the problem with it is it doesn't have anything to as an alternative. It just burns the house down, right? It's just an arsonist, but it can't build anything instead of it. So the next metamorphosis is the child, the third metamorphosis, which represents something very different. So the child then is a radical departure from both the camel and the lion. The camel and the lion are not life-affirming beings, they're not positive beings. They don't have anything to offer, right? The camel just follows the will of the other, and the lion just rejects the will of the other. Neither of them builds anything or suggests anything as an alternative. The child, on the other hand, is very different. It is a self-spinning wheel. It is creative. And so the child creates their own values, and that's something that neither the camel or the lion can do. And the paradox is that when we grow spiritually, is that here in the 3 metamorphoses, as we grow, we become children, right? Whereas obviously in everyday life, that's not what happens, but this is a metaphor, right, for our spiritual existence. And therefore the fully developed spiritual man is spiritually a child, right? He may have the knowledge and intelligence and fortitude of an adult, but he has the creativity of a child in terms of his ability to create new values. And so this is a bit of an irony, right? And it's also a bit of a paradox. How do we develop into youth, right? But it was both a parody and a paradox and a little ironic, but I think this is a very meaningful text if you think about what exactly it is that we really respect in children, and that's their positive, creative ability and their ability to imagine something radically new and radically different. Okay, so that's the end of the 3 Metamorphoses lecture, and I will get the next couple lectures up soon. Thank you.